Hello, and welcome to an adventure like no other. Far more than what you have known, there is something far more to be known than you can ever know. And it is all about you, the real you, your real awareness with your intuitive senses. You were never taught that the real you, your real awareness, is operating 5 bodies in cause and effect, restricting creation. You have been taught to think that you are only a one-dimensional human person, with a mind and emotions, and with a very short lifespan on this planet Earth. More than what your mind can grasp is your intuitive senses that can be opened to see beyond all your restrictions. You have always had an opening to see beyond what you have known, and this has been purposely kept from you, and this is where you have heard rumors and stories about your nightly dreams. Your so-called dreams is your opening to your intuitive senses that will allow you, the personal you, to excel beyond what you have previously known. Everyone has intuitive senses, and very few people take advantage of what is possible by recognizing something more than their mind can understand. Creation has its place for all of us, and then there is all life, which is far more than anything than what can become with creation. Everything we experience is necessary for us to survive with whatever we choose and decide our life to be. New Kevin Smith is the great witness to something more than what can be taught and learned in any school. It can be so that when anyone first listens to Kevin's intuitive side experiences, also known as real side experiences, from what their personal mind has known, Kevin's manner of expression will at first be rather different to comprehend. This is where this introduction and reading the new books and Facebook groups will help. Have fun deciding. DUANE the Great Writer and Seer.
In this real side experience, I would find myself in the presence of an assortment of beings, of various body types, a selection of 4-legged and more animal forms, and bipedal 2-legged varieties. All the body types, however, despite their appearances, were forms where the secondary personal self had been established, as opposed to forms which are directly animated by real awareness, absent of the formulation of the secondary self. The secondary personal self, which comes to the fore as a free will activation of the idea generating body vehicle mechanics, becomes so, and the real awareness, nowness, everything position is removed from. Generally, the secondary personal self is then overindulged, free will creating favoured over the real awareness nowness position, and the being then somewhat disconnects from the real awareness and flounders through creation as the isolated personal self. The creation taking on a life of its own and thinking it is real, as opposed to the realization of it being but a tool and mechanism by which the real awareness can recognize the years it is a part of. From the comparison that the personal self, the ideas as generated through it provide, the idea parts and pieces in comparative relation to the everything isness whole. These assorted body forms I was in the company of, those where the secondary personal self had been established, as I said, were those still immersed with the personal self-consciousness, with no inclination in regards to their real awareness determining reconnection or recognition of the years. Content were they with their created, simulated realities as effected from their self-designed consciousnesses. Despite this, and that some of their body forms would be considered somewhat monstrous from the perspective of, say, a human, impressions revealed none of them were dark force affiliated or ill-intended overwhelmingly, just your typical, unconscious array of beings, with their respective created personalities, identities, and personal self-attitudes. Though as the body types are affected from a consciousness, the extent of distortion or abrasiveness of consciousness, the degree by which beings operate in restricting of others' capacities, can be revealed through the body forms they are operating as. For our creational positioning and body types always mirror in reflected accordance consciousness design. The poorer our life choices and actions in relation to others, the greater distortion of a body type and dismal of creational positioning will be experienced. And as I said, some of the beings in my company were rather distorted of a form, a number of them were more insectoid in appearance, there was a scattering of four-legged animal-like monstrosities also that were rather difficult to describe, so suggesting some of the group had not been operating in the most life and awareness beneficial ways up until that point. Nevertheless, they not only were in my company, but we seemed to be on agreeable, friendly terms, and we appeared to be stationed in rather a dark and gloomy forest setting. Within this forest we had a kind of encampment, a rudimentary set of huts and wooden shacks that served as accommodation. As it transpired, this particular group of assorted body forms and myself, and this forest settlement we occupied while present in the forest, was under the management of another group of beings, as though they were the overseers of this creational position, and where the group and myself present on what was their planet, so we also would fall under their jurisdiction. This seemed on the surface an acceptable situation. There appeared to be no underlying hidden agenda or intentionality of malice, simply a creational position under the control of this other group of beings, who also were of a similar array of body type design as those of my group, the group that I was in the presence of, and that was taking up a momentary residence in the dark forest. The impressions were that I was being afforded the view of one of my many multi-dimensional aspects or body vehicles, operating in whichever creational position it was, and with its own assortment of associates and created situations. For we all are multi-dimensional, we operate throughout the simulator with quite the plethora of vehicles and aspects, all within their respective dimensional positions, and very often going about their lives and situations, and where we may be oblivious of that which they are involved in, until such moments where we are afforded glimpses as to their activities. And over the years I have been made aware of certain of my various dimensional aspects, one of which I shared as an example was a highly renowned scientific character involved in all manner of technology applications in regards to the beneficial galactic projects taking place multi-dimensionally, and where at one point he would be kidnapped by the dark forces, and necessary was it for me to rescue him. Rather an amusing situation, that of rescuing one's self, or rather one of many aspects and vehicles of my multi-dimensional created self, as effected from consciousness. This, then, was another aspect of my multi-dimensional self, as impressions would suggest. A body type that appeared similar to my usual Kevin human form, but an aspect that seemingly wasn't especially motivated or focused where his recognition was concerned. For to stand ultimately as the free being of real awareness light that we all actually are, absent of the necessity of the simulators, in the real universes of the years, we do have to absolutely have intent and focus set with the true reality. Anything less than 100%, and intent must be placed elsewhere, and intent other than with the all ears must be intent placed with ideas of creation. We cannot be absolute with anything unless we have intent and focus with it absolutely, and even a single idea we hold to will have us the effect, in the only position where idea parts and pieces of the everything isness whole can be isolated as experience, aside from the true reality, that being the simulators. And so, as we continue to more so focus and cement intent with the all ears, this will express as every aspect, nuance, and dimensional vehicle of our created self getting with the program, so to speak, as though we are rounding up all our multi-dimensional aspects and aligning their intent also with the real awareness intent of his recognition. And various of our multi-dimensional aspects will be at varying stages of intent alignment, and those that are excelling will be operating in life and awareness beneficial capacities, such as my scientific aspect, as I mentioned. This particular aspect then seemed somewhat dragging behind, so to say, just operating randomly as it was in accordance with the personal self-consciousness, although at least in ways that were not destructive or abrasive, as were the body types he was in close association with, all just going about their decided business, which included the planet they were on with its dense dark forest under the management of the other group of beings, and where the aspect and the group had accommodation afforded them also. This wasn't the only position this particular aspect of mine operated on, as though he was but spending a little time there, as accepted and agreed to by the beings who were the overseers of the planet. Although at one moment one of the group my aspect was in the company of was seemingly murdered, and much suspicion and hostility would ensue, accusations fired back and forth, as the perpetrator was assumed to be one of the group of assorted beings. As though to resolve the situation, so the overseers of the planet would directly engage with the group and my aspect. They would proclaim how they had determined as to what had been responsible, and the group and my aspect were to accompany them deeper into the forest far beyond the encampment, where revealed would be what had caused the demise of the member of the group. The group of overseers and the group and my aspect would all clamber aboard vehicles that appearance-wise looked like military jeeps, and all would proceed through the jungle. Throughout this experience I was viewing through the eyes of this particular aspect of mine, and as we proceeded through the forest, scattered along the route we were taking would be various wood-carved depictions of assorted animal forms. They all would be exquisitely designed, and I was especially drawn to some of the alligator and crocodile carvings that were positioned along the side of the dirt tracks we were traversing along. Eventually we came to a clearing, where I, my aspect, and the group that were in association would be seated upon felled trees, and we would be addressed by the group of overseers. My aspect had the closest friendship with one of the group that was a kind of a quadrupedal lizard-like creature. It reminded me of an oversized Komodo dragon. Earlier I mentioned how on the surface there seemed nothing untoward as to the overall situation, that the group and my aspect simply were electing to take up temporary residence on a planet as governed by the group of beings. But as is often the case, what is occurring on the surface may not be the reality of what is actually taking place, for as it transpired, the overseers addressing us now in the clearing revealed that they had murdered our associate. Rather an unexpected turn of events, to be sure, and furthermore would the overseers openly reveal that the group and myself, my aspect, had also been subject to that which we hadn't consented to. And it was now made apparent as to why the overseers were so very accommodating in allowing the group and myself, my aspect, and very likely other beings and body types to be present on their planet and take up a temporary residence. For these overseers would be the equivalent of real-side, other-dimensional organ harvesters. They would permit body types on their planet, allow them to remain for whatever duration they desired, but at a certain point they would remove certain of their organs. How they did this unrealized by their victims wasn't made apparent, but this would perhaps explain the dark forbidding nature of the forestry region we were in. For as I said earlier, body type and creational positioning is reflected in equal measure to the consciousness, and these overseers possessed not only distorted and monstrous body forms, but their base world of operations was somewhat dismal and uninviting also. Why the group and my aspect elected to visit and take up temporary residence was then rather baffling, but seems they, my aspect, and all others who had fallen prey to the insidious actuality of the overseers' motivations for welcoming all to their planet, had their reasons. The overseers now would delight in revealing the organs they had removed from each member of the group and my aspect, for the organs had been as though dried and reduced in size and placed in small ornately designed boxes, and where the overseers would flip the boxes' lids and reveal the organs contained within. The organ my aspect had removed was the liver, as it transpired, and the group would just sit in stunned silence, and either were unwilling to in any way retaliate or vent their outrage upon the overseers, or were unable, as though the group and my aspect were powerless to impose upon the overseers, as though the overseers had developed their consciousnesses, where effected were body forms that were very capable and somewhat untouchable in relation to the group and my aspect. Everything able to occur between body types subject to agreement, and the particular arrangement of agreements as shared between the overseers, my aspect and his group, dictated the overseer's ability to organ harvest, but the group and my aspect's inability to bestow any harm upon them in retaliation. The scene would fade. I would find myself now in my recreated UK house. Our recreated homes will generally represent the consciousness, and where we can be apprised of idea agreements the consciousness comprises of, as they will manifest within the confines of our consciousness representing houses, and we can be afforded heads-up warnings of that which may have impact upon our physical level body types. For everything starts on the real side, every idea agreement instantly its effects, but takes the moments it will to filter through to the physical and impact the physical body in whatever way it might. That with every agreement we forge that affects adversely, we can identify the idea and have the opportunity as to its removal prior to the impact it will cause, physical level speaking. Remove the idea and we no longer experience the effect. And as was revealed in this experience, what with our various dimensional aspects going about their decided business and activities, despite they seemingly having their separate positions and circumstances, ultimately they still are part of our overall creation, and that which befalls them will have some bearing on the physical level body vehicle, as everything transpiring multi-dimensionally will filter through. The physical is the dumping ground for every idea we are creating or agreeing to as created by others that affects whatever is the nature of the idea taken on. In regards to my aspect having its liver removed, this would manifest adversely in some physical level body form at some stage, as impressions revealed, and indeed on one of the walls of my house, so would a kind of graphic be displayed, as though a computer screen displaying the members of my group, their names, and the organs that had been removed, and included on the list would be my aspect with reference to the liver which had been taken from it. I would still be operating as my aspect in my consciousness representing house, absent of my liver then, but having revealed the idea of this situation as being a consciousness placed, as every idea we experience must be, with the revelation of how it will have adverse physical level body form bearing at some stage unless the idea is removed. For even as we experience such happenings, we are not resigned to them. Remove the idea, and the effects also are absent, as though the liver harvesting never occurred, and the impending physical level repercussions now cannot take place. Necessary was it then seemingly for my aspect that I was operating as to relocate again, but now be in the presence of Val and DUANE. It was as though DUANE intended to personally ensure the potential physical level body form fallout was avoided. In other words, he was going to remove the idea agreement that was effecting such to be, the ideas that had manifested as the situation where my aspect had had its liver removed. For this to be accomplished, so necessary was it for me, my aspect I was viewing through, to take up a momentary residence inside a kind of safe house as provided by DUANE. I would suggest to him that I could just erect a tent outside, but DUANE insisted that to ensure my aspect's safety, I must spend a period of time inside the building. As it seemed, my aspect was now in some kind of danger, in relation to the powerful organ-harvesting overseers that were now being denied their prize, through the idea that had effected that situation being now erased by DUANE. As I said, Val was present also, and additionally, was DUANE advising him to accept the protection that the house could afford, as though Val was in some kind of a peril also, and required the same kind of safety assurances as my aspect. The safe house was directly under DUANE's supervision, and whomever was within it would be assured that nothing untoward could befall them, until such time as the danger period passed, the overseers no longer then posing as a threat, and whatever was of a threat to Val no longer was presenting as such either. As everything transpiring in our experiences is based on our agreements, if beings that posed as a danger at some stage no longer do, this suggests the agreements that allowed that they could adversely impact us have been removed. Sometimes such agreements, in regards to the ability of others to harm us, take the moments they will to unveil and release, and this seemed to be the situation here, in regards to the overseers, and whatever or whomever was a threat to Val. DUANE had neutralized the idea agreements that would effect manifest adversely through to my physical body form, the liver removing incident, but until my aspect was safe from the overseers, until the agreements that presented as the danger the overseers were was removed, so my aspect and Val would be under the protection of DUANE in his afforded safe house.